part of our Zoom technology. We know we're going to probably end John's Gospel next Wednesday. We have 4 chapters left. So that leaves us 3 Wednesday classes until
So,
until the slide. So we thought we would study a shorter book of the Bible, and there are 4 we want to just throw out. There's a little poll. So do you see this? There's 13 of us, and then those of you in person. Can you all read that? Okay.
mm-hmm.
Yes. This is Ed Edelman's handiwork.
Yeah. All right.
He built this question with the answers. So Colossians, James, Philippians, or Galatians. The results are coming in. This would be cool to do in a. If you could do it in worship, it'd be neat to get a live poll. All right, we've got 3 more that haven't voted. Maybe they're tied up right now.
How about the hell people in here?
And you guys, what do you
The
think?
faithful.
I'll go with the majority.
Okay.
If you like up there. I'll be there.
We've got Galatians in the lead right now.
In the lead.
Galatians in the lead.
Sounds like a
Do I have a
round and a quarter.
That's right. Going once, going twice. Well, that'd be great. Galatians would be good. That's a solid Easter freedom in Christ, fruits of the Spirit. It would take us into kind of toward Pentecost. Cool. That work for you guys that are here in person?
Sure.
All right. Galatians it is. We'll start that on April 21st.
All right, John chapter 18. So now it's Thursday night. It's just after the Lord's Supper, which doesn't exist in John's Gospel, but for the rest it does. After the foot washing. And after Jesus' long extended prayer for the church and for the Holy Spirit and so on. Chapter 18. When Jesus had spoken these, he went forth with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden, which it isn't named here. Maybe it's just assumed. The other ones say Garden of Gethsemane, which he and his disciple entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. And Judas got a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, lanterns and torches, almost like kill the beast.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming out with pitchforks and with torches. So probably who these people are the temple guard. Probably the temple guard, because they're going to bring them back to that area with Caiaphas. So it could be the temple guard. The soldiers might refer to, because they've got their own mercenaries. But what it's not the Roman guards. It's not the Roman guard. 4. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen, all right, so John's gospel, again, a little bit more higher Christology, we'd say, that Jesus has complete knowledge of what's going on. He asks them, whom do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Then Jesus said, ego eimi. He uses the divine name of God to identify himself. And look what happens. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing beside him. Look at 6. And when he had said this, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. You probably don't remember this part, because in the synoptics, let me go over here, and I'll go to maybe a little Luke's gospel here. And just read a little bit of that too. Now, there's nothing in John's gospel of Jesus, sweating beads of blood, nothing about the disciples falling asleep, nothing about Jesus and his abject humanity praying that this thing would pass through by him. None of that is in John's gospel. When it comes time for the guard to come in Luke's Gospel, chapter 22, Judas comes, betrays him with a kiss. They talk about drawing with a sword. Jesus stops that. And then they come after Jesus. But look at John's Gospel again on 18. Whom do you seek? They fall to the ground. I told you, I am he. Let these other people go. Now, the synoptics, they run away. The disciples have no problem sticking around. They run away. But here, who is the conductor of this great peace here? The guards come up, who are you seeking? They don't even ask him first. They don't ask, who is the Jesus? No, who are you seeking? I am he. Stand up. Let these men go. Take me now. This was to fulfill what was happening. They didn't lose one. Verse 10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. John's the only one who refers to the name also. Probably by this time, there might have been legends, or there might have been oral tradition that now circulated among the Christians, that now we actually know the name of the slave. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus heals the ear that was chopped off. There's no healing that goes on in this place. Jesus said to Peter, put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which the Lord has given me? Isn't that different from Luke? Let this cup pass by me. Jesus says, give me a double, because he's going into where he belongs. Now, look at the juxtaposition of this next section here. It is cleverly put together. My Bible is a study Bible, and it has different paragraphs with headings. Does yours have this in a different paragraph with heading, or is yours just long proses?
No, headings.
All right, so here's where mine is. The first short paragraph is Jesus being taken to
Right.
and then right after that, there's another paragraph about Peter, being questioned. Aren't you one of them? And then the third paragraph is Jesus before the high priest again.
Mhm.
What the impression is going on here is that there are two simultaneous trials going on. There are two people who are being cross-examined simultaneously. Jesus and Peter. So as we're reading this, they bounce back and forth to kind of see how each one is doing in their particular trial. So let's find out how they're doing. Verse 12. So the band of soldiers and their captain and officers of the Jews seized Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had been giving counsel to the Jews that it was best for one man to die for all the people. That irony of Caiaphas was not lost on John. All right? So now Jesus is being dragged before his court. Let's see how Peter's doing. 15. Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. I wonder if it's the one whom Jesus loved.
Yeah, I read there are a few thoughts on that. Some people thought it could be certainly John. Another thought maybe it was Judas. Because he had the connection. But boy, you think Peter would not want anything to do with them at this point.
Yeah.
If it was Judas.
Right. But it doesn't have anything in this one about betraying him with a kiss.
Mhm.
So maybe Peter wouldn't have known.
That's the thing, yeah.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Could have been Judas.
Yeah.
And they would have let Judas have free access.
Right, because he's just been there.
And maybe that's how Peter got access, because Judas got access.
Right.
All right.
My study Bible says it was probably John.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
He just didn't want to say it
Yeah.
again.
I'm going to brag here, but I had connections.
The one Jesus loved. All right, so now Peter's being dragged in front of his court. Let's see how well he does. 15, Peter followed Jesus, another disciple. As this disciple was known to the high priest, they are supporting your view. Could be Judas. He entered the court of the high priest along with Jesus. So they're going in together. While Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the maid who kept the door and brought Peter in. You know, I don't remember this detail here.
And the others, yeah.
I mean, it's certainly not in the others, but I guess I just don't remember this. So it gives more credence that it was Judas. I like that. Scratch out your bottom section there. Wrong. The maid who kept the door said to Peter, aren't you one of them? He said, I am not. I am not. Now the servant and officer had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. They were standing warming themselves. Peter was also standing warming himself. All right, so they're both coming in. They're coming to basically the same area, coming in both to their own trial. Jesus is going to be cross-examined by the highest ranking Jewish officials, bound up and in chains. Peter is being cross-examined by a 12-year-old girl. Yeah. And she says, kind of half-heartedly, your accent, weren't you one of them? And immediately, Peter caves. Well, let's see how Jesus does. 19. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and teaching. Jesus answered them, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and the temple where all the Jews come together. I've said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I have said to them, what they know that I have said. And when they said this, one of the officers struck Jesus with his hand, saying, is this the way you speak to the high priest? Now, how did Jesus respond to the high priest and the synoptics?
I don't think he said anything. It was quiet.
Not much.
Or
He
it's like
said the time.
he said, he sort of just says, you said that. That is what you say or something.
Yes. Let me read you from Luke's gospel. If you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer. From now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power. And he said, are you then the Son of God? You have said so. So Jesus doesn't speak much in the synoptics. Almost resigned to the fact that this is a kangaroo court that's already convicted him. John's gospel, bring it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bring it. One-on-one. So, first testimony, Peter falls. Jesus does very well. Well, let's go back to Peter and see how he does. 25. Now Peter was standing and warming himself, and they said to him, aren't you not one of his disciples? He denied it, I'm not. One of the servants of the high priest, a kinsman, the one whose Peter had cut off. Didn't I see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it. At once the cock crowed. Peter's falling, caving quickly at his trial. Well, let's go back to Jesus. See how he's doing. Verse 28. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early. They did not enter the praetorium so they would not defile themselves and might eat the Passover. Do you catch the irony of that? They are trying to murder a man. And when it comes to the praetorium, that is the entrance to a Gentile building with a Gentile Pontius Pilate there. Said, can't go there, wouldn't be prudent, wouldn't be safe. They can't go there because I might defile myself and I won't be able to eat the Passover. I mean, the irony is dripping here of what they're doing and now suddenly what they will not do. So Pilate came out to them and said, what accusations do you bring against this man? They answered, if this man were not an evildoer, we wouldn't have handed him over. They don't answer the question, do they? Because the fact we're actually handing him over to you should be proof enough. But of course it isn't. Pilate said, well, take him yourself and judge him by that law thing that you have. Because Jews at the time had a whole lot of autonomy. They could do whatever they wanted up to capital punishment, but they could do whatever they wanted to do with anybody that was breaking one of their own indigenous laws. So Pilate could see right through it, that it was trumped up charges. Of course, they say we can't put anybody to death, which is fulfilled. So we've got the two trials going on. Peter collapses very quickly. Jesus, even though he's in front of the most powerful men in the Jewish establishment, now he's in front of the most powerful men in the Roman establishment. And while Peter caves so quickly, Jesus stands his ground.
And look at verse 32 there too, where it says the kind of death he was going to die would be fulfilled. If the Jewish people had executed, and which they did at times, think about St. Stephen in the book of Acts. How did they do it?
Stoned.
Stoning.
Right, stone him. And yet Jesus had said, when I'm lifted up, I'll draw all people to myself. So that in order for that kind of death to be fulfilled, it had to be through the Romans.
Anything else up to that point that you wanted to highlight, Drew?
Yeah, I had a couple other little things. The word back in verse 3, when Judas comes, yours said a band of soldiers, didn't it?
Yeah.
Mine says detachment. But the word is a really specific word. I looked up in the Greek, it's the word for cohort, which conservative number for a cohort would be around 200 people.
Really?
Yeah, and that's conservative. It could be bigger than that. So what you would need to picture is this is not a handful or half dozen people. They're bringing an army to try to find him. And I think the torches too. Remember at the Passover, there's a full moon. They might have needed a couple torches, but I wonder if they think Jesus would be hiding. They're gonna have to find him. Because when you look at also verse 5, when they say, who do you want? Jesus says, who do you want? They say Jesus of Nazareth. And then he says, I am he, and they fall down. Do you think they fall down because of the power of the name? Or could it be because he's surrendering himself? And they're not expecting, like, if I'm looking for this wanted criminal, that he's going to be right here, the guy that I'm talking to. What do you think?
Well, I think this is John's way of showing that the presence of Jesus is so overpowering that they know that they are in the presence of somebody beyond a thug they're trying to arrest.
Yeah.
But I want to play off a little bit of what you're saying about that cohort, 200 people. They have just witnessed Jesus with this Palm Sunday and the crowd.
Yeah.
Probably they're expecting that this is going to be an uprising.
Right.
Maybe that whole crowd will be present for that.
Yeah, because they've had experience with other people that have done that. They've fought it tooth and nail. Then about Malchus in verse 10, we know that certain times, think about Simon of Cyrene who carries Jesus' cross. We find out later in the New Testament that he becomes a disciple because his kids are mentioned, Rufus. I wonder if, we don't know for sure, but if the reason they remember this servant's name that Jesus then heals, although it doesn't say in John's gospel that he heals the ear, but if you've had your ear cut off and then Jesus has healed you, did he become a disciple, maybe? And so the church would have known him, potentially.
Yeah, so maybe not the time of Luke and Matthew,
Right.
by the time of John, it would be on.
Yeah, he could have gotten, he could have become a believer. And I was curious, what do you make of the symbolism of the fire, verse 18?
Yeah, why the charcoal fire?
Yeah, the coal.
I wonder, yeah, because that comes around back again in the end, last chapter of John with the charcoal fire there as well.
Right.
I'm not sure. There was something else here in this first part that was gonna. Let me see.
While you're thinking about that, I've got one other note that I had never heard this before. In verse 27, when Peter denies it, at that moment a rooster began to crow. And then in some of the other synoptic gospels, it talks about, Jesus says before it crows twice. The word, so in the military, the Roman army had 4 watches during the night. So they would change rotations of the soldiers who'd be guarding the city from 9 to 12, 12 to 3 a.m., 3 to 6, and then 6 to 9. And a trumpet would sound whenever that watch was over. So the people that were on duty would know, okay, now it's time to go home, and the others would take. And the word in Latin was Gallicinium, which literally meant the cock crow. And so I wonder if Jesus knew every night this trumpet would sound, this quote cock crow. Was it a literal rooster, maybe, or could it have been that bugle, which Jesus would have known?
Oh, really?
That would have happened. So I never heard that before. I thought that was an interesting thought. It's the middle of the night.
Okay. And one more thing about the trial so far. It's held sometime like at what, 3 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
which shows that it can't be a legitimate trial anyway.
Yeah.
They finally bring Jesus at daybreak. Verse 33. Now remember in the synoptics when Jesus was being questioned by Pilate, how many times did Pilate say, ask a question and just, you have said so, you have said so. So let's see how Jesus does here. A little more chatty. Verse 33. Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? This is a guy that gets the point.
Yeah.
Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, do you say this on your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Pilate said, am I a Jew? It's like, I don't even want to get involved with this family spat. He really, really doesn't care. However, Pilate had like what, 1 or 2 situations before Jesus in which there were other people claiming to be the Messiah, or at least revolutionary leaders, and he had to put them down. He got into trouble from Rome because he put them down so violently and maliciously. And so now you've got another one, and you would think that Pilate would just say, well, get rid of him. I mean, but Pilate's on probation right now with Rome. If he doesn't do well here in the hinterland of the Roman Empire, there's no place for him in the Senate in Rome. So that's why Pontius Pilate is being so careful with this one, because he's blown it 1 or 2 other times.
What happens to him after all this?
He really goes into nothing.
Okay.
He goes into nothing, yeah. But he is called back, but called back not as a promotion, but really removed from there.
I think Rome called him out.
Called him back, yes.
Back in.
And I heard too that he was really, the Jewish people, even these governors knew they had to tread lightly with them because they were so particular about idolatry, and other governors had been more sensitive, like that when the army would come in, they would have on the top of their flags a little bust of the emperor, a little And so the Jewish people are always saying, we need to take that off because we can't have this emperor buster. He had these shields made up that had the name of Tiberius on them. And they said, don't put those right in the city. We can't have this graven image. And other governors said, listen to that. And Pilate refused. And so he really, the Jewish people hated him and were more than happy, as Pastor Scott said, to report him to the.
And didn't he actually bring those shields with the graven image into the temple as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why there was just a rough relationship there. And mind you, I don't even want to be involved with this. Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? And Jesus said, my kingship is not of this world. If my kingship were of this world, my servants would fight that I might not be handed over to the Jews. But my kingship is not of this world. Pilate says, what? No, it isn't. It's cryptic language. Now, you and I understand from this side of the cross, but it doesn't make sense to Pilate. So Jesus goes into this little talk, and then Pilate says, so you're a king then, right? Jesus said, you say that I'm a king, for this I was born, for this I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth, and everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And Pilate says to him, what is Pilate saying? What is true? Here again, we're not sure with what emotion or tone Pilate said these words. He could have said it sarcastically. Right. What is truth? As if what we're talking about here has anything to do with truth. This is about politics, not truth. Could have been sarcastic. Could have been inquisitive. Tell me, Jesus. Tell me what the truth is. Or it could have been dismissive. Yeah, truth. We'll figure that out as we go. How do you think Pilate said this? With what tone?
That's when I read it, it always seemed more inquisitive to me for some reason.
Which would really be in line with John in that John's turning the tables. Everything is upside down. What would it be like for Pilate to be asking Jesus, this beaten, homeless rabbi in front of him, tell me, sir, what is true? Would the Roman governor really stoop that low to ask of Jesus truth? Could be.
I feel like it's almost saying that truth is in the eye of the beholder kind of thing. So, what really is truth? How do you really define it?
How do you define truth?
Yeah.
Exactly, because the truth of the Jews is going to be different from your truth and my truth.
Yeah.
My truth is I've got to take the piece.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I interpret it.
That's good.
I think a clue too is how he, as soon as he asked the question, immediately, he doesn't wait for Jesus to even respond. It says, with this, he went out again to the Jews. It's almost like, boom, he's just like, throw the question out, not sincerely wanting to.
Almost rhetorical.
Yeah.
It's probably rhetorical. Yeah, because he's not waiting for a response, nor does Jesus give one.
Right.
Yeah.
So at least Jesus didn't see this as an invitation to proselytize.
Right. Let me tell you
about the truth.
Yeah, you died tonight, Pilate. You know where you're spending eternity.
Right.
He didn't say that.
Right.
All right, so now we got the trial. Pilate is speaking a whole lot less than Jesus is. Completely the opposite of the synoptics. Again, the question we're asking is, who is in control here? Jesus, obviously. And after he said this, he went out to the Jews again and said, I don't find any crime in this guy. But you have a custom, and I should release one man for you at the Passover. Will you have me release to you the King of the Jews? They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, mine says, now Barabbas was a robber. What does yours say?
Now, Barabbas had taken part in an uprising.
Okay. Here's the other irony here is You know, Pilate tries to release Jesus several times. And Pilate's the most powerful man in the whole region. He first tries to release him, saying, I don't find any crime in this man. Well, then release him. All right, we'll try a second approach. I'm going to have you choose one. This docile, homeless rabbi who preaches about love and heals people, or the scourge, the scum of the earth, this robber insurrectionist named Barabbas. I mean, it's almost like he's setting up such an easy dichotomy between the two that it would be easy for them to choose. We're going to release Jesus. So then it is like, what's the law term about no contest? We're not going to find you guilty. We're not going to find you innocent. It's no contest. Jesus, just be on your way and behave yourself. So he sets up this dichotomy should be an easy one. And yet they chose Barabbas, which I always think is interesting. I don't know if the commentaries pick this up, but I do. The name Barabbas. All right, you know what the word bar means, right? In Hebrew? A bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. Bar mitzvah means son. Bat mitzvah is daughter, coming of age. So Barabbas's first name is Bar, and second part is Abba. What's that?
Daddy.
Father. So Barabbas's actual name translates as son of the Father. So who are you going to want me to release? God's son or the son of the Father? And they chose, as Great as Lost Ark would say, poorly.
Yeah.
They chose the wrong son of the Father. Anything else in there?
Yeah, I'm just struck by the throughout this whole chapter, this choice between the way of violence as to accomplishing your goals in Jesus's path of humility, of gentleness, of nonviolence. And I think that choice between Barabbas is the age-old, who are you going to choose nowadays? I mean, which path will we take? Which way of life will we adopt? And that hatred is so blinding that they would choose Barabbas over Jesus is really striking.
Yeah. Chapter 19. Then Pilate took Jesus, and mine says scourged him. I got the old words. What's yours?
Flogged.
Flogged. And it's amazing the brevity of this. We don't have to get into the graphic nature of this, but this, if you saw The Passion of the Christ from Mel Gibson, he really captured it well. This isn't just a little bit of a beating. This is part of crucifixion. As I mentioned at Good Friday, is that Rome thought beheading a person was too kind. That you actually had to make crucifixion, you had to make a punishment as a deterrent. And so they made crucifixion as painful as possible. So with the scourging even, you know, when they're ripping off sheets of flesh from his back and his arms and his legs, after they get done, they douse it with salt water. Salt water does two things. First of all, it increases the pain, and in some small way, it cauterizes the bleeding to perpetuate the life even longer, so they can experience even more pain. So it's crucifixion is a long process. It's not just nailing somebody on a cross. It's a process, and anybody who's ever seen that process knew there was a huge deterrent. But even that, Rome crucified something like 35,000 people.
Right.
Until Rome itself outlawed crucifixion for being too barbaric.
And didn't the Jewish custom limit the number of floggings to a certain number?
40 minus 1.
That's it. But the Romans didn't have that. They could just do it as long as they wanted, right? Even more brutal.
Right. Then the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns, placed in his head, arrayed him in a purple robe. Hail, King of the Jews! Struck him. And Pilate went out again and said to them, behold, I bring him to you, that you may find I have no crime in him. All right, so I'm going to beat the heck out of him. Will that be enough to satisfy your blood thirst? Did you see that Mel Gibson? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one scene when they bring Jesus back after his
It's pretty bad.
talking. And I'm always amazed by actors, how they can capture something in just the slightest.
I'm aware about it. So
They bring out Jesus next to Pilate, and Pilate looks at him and just kind of raises eyebrows. Like, wow, I didn't expect that. I mean, that's overboard. I mean, just the look on this actor's face really has really captured it well. All right, so he tries to get rid of him. I don't find any crime in him. Can't. Gives him the option between the Son of Man and the Son of the Father and the Son of the Father. They can't. I'm going to beat him to a pulp here, and maybe that will satisfy you. I still find no crime in him. They still can't. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns, and the Pilate said, Echo home, here is the man. And when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said, take him yourself and crucify him. I find no crime in him. Again, he tries to get him released. Jews said, we have a law, it says he must die. He made himself equal to the Son of God. When Pilate heard these words, he said to him, more afraid, went to the praetorium again and said, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore, don't you want to speak to me? Don't you know I have the power to? Does he have the power to release him?
yes.
He thinks he does. But you realize there's something more happening here than just the earthly eyes can see. There is a salvific plan laid out from the foundations of the earth, and in some way you can't change it. Did anybody read Stephen King's novel JFK? It's about this thick. You know, Stephen King is warped. There's something about his thinking, and he's just odd, but he hooks you. Anyways, the premise of the book is that some guy, like in our time, finds a wormhole, goes back to 1963, and tries to stop the assassination of JFK. And the whole premise of the book is that there's such a power, there is such a force, momentum, that every time he was trying to stop it, his car would break down. There would be a car accident he couldn't get through. There would be something, he just couldn't get to it. So there was some power at work that he couldn't change the course of events. I won't tell you if JFK dies or not. But it's the same thing happening here. Pilate is trying his best to release an innocent man, but there's a power. And it's not just his political life. There's a power in the course of events that John wants to let us know that this is not an accident. This is the divine God plan of God that cannot be thwarted. He was even more afraid. 9 went back in, gave no answer. Don't you know I have the power to release you? He really doesn't. The power to crucify you? You really don't. Jesus said, you would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from the Father above. Therefore, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin. 2 things there. You would have no power unless it was given over you. All right, so again, just like I said, the course of events are in place. God's in control. Who is Jesus referring to in the second part of that clause?
Jews.
Who?
The Jews.
Therefore, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin.
It says the one. You think Judas at first. There's got to be an and with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that, because the obvious answer would be Judas. But it's very clear in John's gospel that Pilate, that Judas, is being governed by these course of events as well.
So Caiaphas handed him over to Pilate.
Could be Caiaphas. Could be Caiaphas. Or could be, in that large, as Renato said, could be the Jews. Because by this time, the Jews had kicked the Christians out of the synagogue, and the persecution was beginning. And there might have been a lot of animosity between the Christians and the Jews at this point. I'm not sure, because it is a singular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Pastor, excuse me. But at that point, Pilate has two problems. One problem is his wife comes in and tells him, which is not here, about the dream that she had. And the second point is that he washes his hands of the whole thing and says, that be on your head, not in mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which refers back to those Jewish leaders.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. 12. Upon this, Pilate sought to release him. Oh, no, come on. How many times is this now? The Jews cried out. Now, this is really, really important. If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king sets him against Caesar. Oh, now he's playing the trump card. If you release this, you're no friend of Caesar. As if the Jewish leaders are friends of Caesar. Now, this is really important. Your next couple of verses. When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down the judgment seat, what they call the pavement in Hebrew, Gaba. It was a day of preparation of the Passover. All right, we talked about this. Synoptics, he dies the day after Passover. He's really on the Passover day right now, in which the sacrificial lamb is about to be sacrificed on the cross, but also in the homes. Now, it was day of preparation. It was about the 6th hour. What time is that?
Mine says it was about noon.
Yes. The first hour is at 6 a.m. Which now I am stumped a little bit. Drew will have to answer this question.
Don't put me on that. Don't. I'll do my best.
Because the synoptics say that he was crucified at 9 a.m. Starting then. Now we're at the 6th hour. It's already noon. I thought by 3, he's already dead. Let's read on and see.
Yeah, let's go back. Yeah. We sure the 6th hour, that is for sure noon.
Well, mine says it was about noon.
About
That's
noon,
what mine
your
says.
translation.
That's just a translation.
Let's see what John. Maybe John wants to shorten that time of the cross. We'll find out. He said to the Jews, Pilate said to the Jews, "Here's your king." They cried out, "Away with him, crucify." Pilate said, "Shall I crucify your king?" Tries to get rid of it again. Now look at this. The chief priests answered him, "We have no king but who?" And in the Roman Empire, Caesar is not only the big cheese, the Caesar, he's also what?
King.
He's a king, but also what?
An emperor.
He's also the emperor, but he's also what?
God.
What is the religion in the Roman Empire?
Caesar.
Caesar.
Worship. Emperor worship. He is their God too. Caesar is not only their emperor, but he is their God. Literally, it's emperor worship. Almost like in Japan during World War II, when there was a big thing about when the emperor of Japan kind of gave up that emperor worship. So the irony of here, we have no king but Caesar. What did the Jewish leaders call Jesus up on? What were the charges against him?
Blasphemy.
He was done.
Blasphemy. And when these Jewish leaders say, we have no king but Caesar, what are they committing?
Blasphemy.
Then they hand him over to be crucified.
I'm thinking that Pilate was confused from their hate. He couldn't understand maybe their hate for Jesus. They couldn't understand why they could hate Jesus for who he was. And that's what manifested it.
Well, here again, you don't try to kill a person because they're preaching about love and they're healing people and they're feeding them bread from 5 loaves and 2 fish. Again, I've said it before, if Jesus weren't who he claimed to be, the Jewish leaders were correct and righteous in trying to put him to death. Because he wasn't indeed, if he wasn't who he claimed to be, he did indeed break all the blasphemy laws of the Old Testament. So from their perspective, Jesus has done the most despicable of all crimes and deserving of death. Pilate just doesn't see it that way. Or his issue isn't their issue. So now we're going to put Jesus to death. See if anything happens with the hours here that we can figure out.
The 6th hour is noon in the Jewish tradition. So 9 a.m. would have been, according to Mark, when he's begun to be crucified.
Right.
Yeah, a different
Different
way
timing.
of remembering it.
I bet the reason that John is different, it probably coincides with when they actually slaughtered the Passover lamb.
I bet you're right. Yeah.
They probably slaughtered the lamb at noon.
Good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here it says that it's perhaps Roman time.
Mm-hmm.
If John used Roman time, then the appearance before Pilate would have been around 6 a.m. and the crucifixion at 9 a.m. So, just depends on whose time it is.
Also, when it says the 6th hour, you're thinking it might be 6 a.m.?
That's what it says in this study Bible. If they were going by Roman time and not
Yeah, the Jewish.
Jewish.
I don't think there's any way that he'd be having, back it up. Jesus has been beaten, has been brought before Pilate several times. There's no way that Pilate would have started a trial at 4 a.m.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
I think your commentary is trying to meld a couple of traditions together as one. This is why it's interesting to keep them separate, because they're all trying to convey a truth, whatever that is. They're trying to convey a truth in their own way. All right, let's see how the we don't see all the 17. So they took Jesus and went out bearing his own darn cross. All right, mine doesn't say darn. It should have said something else. Who carries the cross of Jesus in the synoptics? Simon of Cyrene.
Yes, I agree.
They compel him.
Yeah.
John's gospel, Jesus has just been beaten to a pulp. He's been into his debate with Pilate. When it comes time, he kicks over that crossbeam, puts it on his shoulder, and says, "Bring it. Bring it." Who's in control? So there must have been a tradition that John knew about with Simon the Cyrene, for him to even have to say he carried his own cross.
Yeah.
So John is countering that in some way. He doesn't want to show the humanity of Jesus so weakened that he can't carry his own cross. Took him to the place called the Skull, which in Hebrew is Golgotha, where they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side and Jesus between them. There's no conversation here between Jesus and the other thieves.
There's also not the people crying out, "Save yourself," as if there's that challenge.
Pilate also wrote a title and put it on the cross, said, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this title for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. It was written in Hebrew, in Latin, in Greek. We're going to make sure the whole world knows that. And I love this next part. The chief priest said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews. Say the man says I'm the King of the Jews." And now Pilate's got some cojones. Now he says, "I have written what I've written." Yeah, right. The big guy now he's taken on because of a little placard. As if he's doing the righteous thing all of a sudden. Boo, hiss. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments, made 4 parts, one for each soldier's tunic. Said, "Let's not tear the tunic. This was to fulfill scripture. They parted my clothing. Among them, they cast lots for my clothing." From Psalm 22.
Yeah, I've always heard that that the symbolism of that garment is powerful. I mean, of course, that would have been his most precious possession.
Probably only possession.
Yeah, and that some people think that, according to a typical Jewish custom, a man's mother made that for him.
Oh, really?
So it might have been Mary who had woven that. But then another thing too, that with the seamless, that it's similar to what the priest would have worn, the high priest. Kind of, we still have that tradition today. We rarely will wear this at Christ Lutheran, but we'll sometimes wear that at the traditional service, that vestment called the chasuble, which is a word in the Latin. It means little house. It's the seamless garment. What that shows is the unity of God's people. That's the one garment together. But that's a pull to this seamless garment that Jesus wore, a reminder of that, his unity, and that they don't tear it because they know it'll be worthless. But just to have them playing dice while he's dying on the cross, there's the irony again.
Yeah. So the soldiers did this, standing at the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clovis, Mary. It's like that, my brother Daryl, my other brother Daryl. Yeah. Right. Mary was a very common name, evidently, back then. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, see, if that were John back there at the trial, he would have used it again. He doesn't use that one, right? So it's got to be Judas. The disciple whom Jesus loves, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." To the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. Again, here's Jesus in complete control. The very end, making sure mom's taken care of. And of course, this is the reason that they think all the disciples died, except for Judas, died that martyr's death, except for John. that, that John took care of. That's where John then eventually, according to tradition, would write the book of Revelation, because he lived a long time, as Mary was very young when she had Jesus. And interesting that nobody knows the grave site of Mary. They know she spent some time in Ephesus, evidently, but nobody knows that site. Boy, can you imagine how much of a pilgrimage site that would be, in particular for the Catholic Church. But of course, then the Catholic Church in 1956, that's right around there, came up with the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary. The bodily Assumption talked about that Mary's body was, almost like Elijah and like Moses, was lifted up into heaven. But that's very, very late, 1950 something, is the Assumption of Mary. That was part of the explanation, I suppose, that there is no grave site. So that's why.
The other thing about giving Mary to John, Jesus, according to how you interpret it, Jesus had brothers, or he had cousins. Some people translate that word brothers as cousins. But Mary had family members who could have taken her into. Why John? I mean, why? Well, part of this, I think, the brothers at this point, they still weren't believers. They were the skeptics. They were critical. Did Jesus give and trust Mary to John because they had that faith? Of course, not in the risen Christ yet, but was there that faith element that he knew was there? Yeah, certainly his brother James becomes a leader in the early church. Right. But not at this point. This is where his brothers are taking him out because he is crazy when they tell him, out of your mind. Out of your mind. Let's go on. Verse 28. Now after this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished. Mine says finished. What does yours say? Yeah, that's probably better. Finished just means things have come to an end. It's probably that word telestai, right? The telestai. It means completed, fulfilled. And Jesus said, not because he was really thirsty, not because this Jesus had any kind of physical needs, not because he was in any pain, but he said to fulfill Scripture, I thirst. And a bowl of vinegar stood there. They put a sponge full of vinegar on what kind of a branch?
Hyssop.
And when's the time we heard about hyssop?
You told us.
Remember?
This
is why we can teach this every year. Hyssop was during the Passover. They dipped the blood in, or they dipped a hyssop branch in the blood of the lamb, and it was put over the doorpost. So the angel of death would pass over. So there's the connection again. Yeah. We've got the hyssop branch that appears one more time. Another thing about that is those hyssop plants were short. They weren't real, a lot of times you picture the cross way up there and Jesus is suspended very high. But you're about 2 feet long to be able to reach up with this, probably out of practicality, if you're crucifying so many people, you're not going to put them way up high, but closer to the ground where it's more visible. People can read the sign. It probably would have been just a couple feet off the ground. It's another sign of that being the case. Oh, I didn't think of that.
I always wondered how they got him down off the cross, because I did picture it
really high up.
High up.
Yeah, I think it's probably equally likely it was, maybe not real super high off. We had a lower.
They held to his mouth. Look at 30. This should be underlined. The death. When Jesus had received the vinegar, he looked around. It is finished. And then he bowed his head, and mine says he gave up his spirit. What does yours say?
He gave up his
spirit.
Nobody took it from Jesus. No, he did not breathe his last. He did not say, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. He just, and then he gives up his spirit because nobody takes it from Jesus.
Yeah, and the other gospels just say, at the end, he shouted. They don't say what he shouted. John says that tetelestai, it is finished. The victory cry.
Yeah. Since it was the day of preparation in order to prevent the bodies from remaining on the cross on the Sabbath, it was a high day, of course, it was. The Jews asked Jesus, the Jews asked Pilate that the legs might be broken. So soldiers came and broke the legs of the first, then the others. They came to Jesus, saw that he was already dead, did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear. The other ones don't have that, do they? Is it just John?
John's the one that mentions the blood and the water coming out.
But do they have the spear? They must have the spear. But this is that, as Drew is pointing out, and it once came out blood and water. Logically, I have heard from my vast medical background that at this point with a crucified individual, there is so much, you actually drown in your own bodily fluids because you can't hoist yourself up to breathe. So eventually you just drown because the abdominal cavity is filling up with all the fluids. And so when you pierce it, that white, looks like water, comes out along with the blood. But then you got to wonder, is John doing it again? Is this the Russian doll trick again? Then on the outside, of course, it's the bodily fluids coming out. You go a little bit deeper. And is he referring to this body broken, this blood shed? Is through the blood and through the water, reference to baptism, by which we enter in. Because, of course, Paul talks about when we're baptized, we are baptized into his death. Into his death. So is this a reference, a veiled reference to baptism?
And then, by the time John's writing too, you have this movement. The letters of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, they get into this as well. But this movement of Gnosticism, which is really about material things are bad, that you're saved through having a special knowledge of God, but downplaying the humanity of Jesus even further. So as much as John's emphasizing the divinity of Jesus, he was also firmly against that Gnosticism. You see that in 1 John a lot about believing he came in the flesh. I wonder if that's to show that, let's not think though Jesus is just a ghost up there. He was really physically suffering at the same time. Just another thought.
No, that's a good thought from, by the time in 325 with the Nicene Creed, there was still some great debate about who Jesus was. Was he 100% man? Was he 100% God? Was he 50-50? Was he 100-100? And there was some people that talked about, it's called the adoption theory. The adoption theory is that Jesus, because of his own righteousness, following the 613 laws, it was in this man, Jesus, it was in his baptism that God then names him as his son. That's the adoption. Mm-hmm. All right. The other theory was, it's called Docetism. Docetism comes from a Greek word doceo, meaning to seem. And Docetism said, no, Jesus really was 100% God. No humanity there. Now, he ate and he drank and he slept because it would just look weird. But if he's going to blend in, he's got to do all those kind of things. But really, he was 100% God that was kind of fooling us as he's walking around us. And Drew is right here. What John's gospel wants to do is accent both. 100% God. You've seen me, you've seen the Father and I are one, and I am, and all that stuff. And at the same time, he really, really dies. Blood and water come out, and he breathes his last, and he dies. So we don't want to fall into that Gnostic heresy either. 35, he who saw it is born witness, his testimony is true, he knows when he tells the truth, you'll also believe. These things took place that the scripture might be fulfilled, not a bone is broken, and on every script, okay? 38. After this, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body. And Pilate gave it to him. He took away the body. Joseph of Arimathea, obviously a rich person. Whether or not he was a member of the Sanhedrin, we're not sure. Nicodemus was. But Joseph of Arimathea had the tomb that he buried him in. And Psalm 22 says, in the grave of a rich man, is that what it says? In the grave of a rich man, he shall be buried. Psalm 22. If you want a really fun book this summer. Paul Meyer, M-A-I-E-R. Paul Meyer, he may be dead by now. Lutheran, maybe a pastor, I'm not sure, but he was a professor at Western Michigan. He wrote a book called The Skeleton in God's Closet. Skeleton in God's Closet. It's about an archaeologist and a bishop of the Catholic Church who were best friends in college. And as they grew and went into their respective fields, the architect became an atheist. And of course, the bishop became even more devout. And the archaeologist finds the biggest discovery in human history. He finds the bones of Jesus. And he knows it's the bones of Jesus because he goes into a tomb, finds these careful bones, and on the bones is the placard, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And in a clay jar on papyrus is written a note by Joseph of Arimathea that I took the body to preserve the desecration of my teacher and hid him here. I had no idea that they would begin the whole resurrection.
Wow.
Great. A skeleton in God's closet. All right. So now the archaeologist is going to his bishop friend with the news that's going to tear down the entire church. And this is what happens. I'm not going to tell you. It's really good though. But the question that it leaves you, if we found the bones of Jesus, would that tear apart your Christian faith?
Yes. Would for me.
Well, Jesus said the resurrected body would be different, and he walked through walls, but he still was able to eat. So he could be resurrected without bone, without his original bones.
So you're saying if they found definitively the bones of Jesus, that wouldn't change anything, huh?
Well, for some people it would, because we're a scientific society, so we like what we can see and feel and test.
It would for me because it would thwart what the resurrection means for me, is you said it on Easter Sunday, but it is God's yes to everything humanity and sin said no to. And if he is still dead in the tomb, the body's bones are still there. I think that means that everything Jesus represented is you know, there's still good in that, but it would utterly tear down the core of our faith. It's not just a nice feeling or the movement idea of Jesus, or, you know, that I don't think the apostles would have ever gone out and let themselves be martyred for an idea. I'm sort of somehow forgiven, or, I mean, it's got to be a bodily, physical resurrection for me.
Wow.
Yeah, fascinating idea. Terrifying, but
Anybody else want to chime in?
What about you, Scott?
Oh, you and I are kindred spirits. You know that. It would destroy it. If Christ has not been raised from the dead, then our preaching and our teaching is in vain.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the dilemma in the book.
Well, how does the end, Pastor? You can't leave us hanging.
A movie we can watch.
Why somebody didn't make a movie yet?
I know, that'd be a fascinating.
Well, Da Vinci Code is kind of close to it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I mean, is anybody going to read it?
He married me.
It's fiction. M-A-I, you'd love
I'd
it.
like to read it, yeah.
You'd love it.
Yeah.
All right, so after
I
Drew
would
reads
read
it,
it,
or
but I still want to know what it is. I want you to tell me.
Last
She
chapter.
read the last chapter of the book.
oh, read the last chapter first. I think you're right.
You come in the fall, we'll start off with that.
All right, so let's go on here. Joseph of Arimathea, verse 38. Drew wants to read it.
Yeah, you can whisper in her ear after class.
All right, I'll whisper in your ear. When the disciples of Jesus secretly take away the body, all right, 39. Nicodemus, who we heard last in chapter 3, also had first come by him at night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. I don't know. That seems like a lot to me.
Yeah, there's a lot.
If I had 100 pounds, what's that one spice in the Middle East that's so expensive?
The nard or?
No, if you buy it today, you go to the Istanbul and you go into the bazaar with the spices, saffron maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get 100 pounds of saffron.
Saffron is for rice.
Is it right? Yeah, is that the?
No, yeah, it is. It's like a little teeny bit.
You get just a little bit on there.
Yeah.
All right. 100 pounds, 40. They took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen clothes with the spices as was the custom. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb where no one had ever laid. So because of the Jewish festival of preparations, the tomb was closed. Jesus laid there.
It's the shroud. Some people think the
The
shroud.
Shroud of Turin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. It's good stuff.
That's powerful. At the at verse 36, where there are these other scriptures that the one, verse 36, not one of his bones will be broken. That goes back to Exodus chapter 12, but it's in reference to the sacrifice, the kind of lamb that you have to offer. And again, I get John's imagery with John the Baptist saying, "Behold, the Lamb of God." That there's this image that Jesus again is the perfect lamb, not one of his bones will be broken. And then that other verse is from Zechariah. I just think it's amazing that these prophets included these foreshadowings of the crucifixion. They'll look on the one they pierced. And it's just haunting how they do that.
All right, we got 2 more chapters for next week. Drew will have to do those. I'm taking my, flying out to California tomorrow to pick up my parents, those snowbirds, and to fly them back to Minnesota, get them all situated back there. They've been out there for 2 months, so take a little time and see them and see my family in Minnesota. Be back actually Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Minnesota. All right. I'm going to run to another meeting at 7:30. Good seeing you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Pastor.